It's always a pleasure to have Mike Gill on Good Morning NFC East on a Monday morning. And Mike, I think when you look at the draw for the Eagles, you have to be kind of happy it's the Giants, right?
Yeah, I think if you were ranking the possible opponents, that the Giants would have been number one on the list. And then, of course, once they win the game, then you're like, well, now the Giants are hot. Well, that's the team you wanted to play. They are the least talented overall roster. I think, though, what they are is maybe one of the better coached teams. How much stock do you put in how much a coach factors in and how well a coach is? I was one of the people who just never bought into Minnesota all year. That said, I didn't think they were going to lose that game yesterday. I just thought they had more talent than the Giants did. I don't think Kevin O'Connell's a guy that we really looked much into this year as a first-year coach. Was he a good coach? Was he a bad coach? What kind of impact did he have on that team winning 13 games this year? I'm not sure, but I think the Giants, for Eagles fans, had to be the team you wanted to see come Sunday. Now you get an Eagles-Giants, which is my favorite Eagle rivalry, way more than Eagles-Cowboys. I am an Eagles-Giants guy. Love this week. Giant fans are real fans. They're real people. They live in they have civic pride. They live in, if you give Giants fans for one thing, they're good, real fans. And this is the best week. I wish Eagle fans would stop giving credence to this stupid Cowboys thing. It's Eagles-Giants number one.
I do love Giants fans too. So as soon as the Giants won, I got texts from Giants buddies. In our workroom, we got a lot of Giants fans at CBS, and they're like, hey, let's go. This is the team we wanted. I'm like, I love it. I love the I-95 rivalry. I love everything about the Eagles-Giants, especially, the Eagles are 33-13 in their last 46 games against the Giants. So I always get to say that to them. I'm like, since the Eagles snapped that 9-game losing streak to the Giants in 2001, it's pretty much been all Eagles, but there's a lot of pressure on Philadelphia this Saturday because they haven't lost them in the playoffs, Mike. Since then, they're 2-0 against the Giants in the playoffs, and they've owned this rivalry.
Yeah, that was the Jeff Garcia. One of those was a Jeff Garcia game. What was that? Had to be like 06, 07, sometime around there. Of course, the Giants, this is the matchup they wanted because it was the only matchup they could get. I mean, this is it for them. They didn't have a choice of who they wanted to play like the Eagles did. The Eagles had not a choice. I mean, you get who is there, but the conversation was, did you want to play Tampa? Did you want to play Dallas? Did you want to play Seattle? Did you want to play the Giants? Giants didn't have that option. They had one option. You win, you're playing Philadelphia. So you get who was assigned to you by that. Now, look, the Eagles have owned this this rivalry recently is because they've been just flat out better. The Giants have been in complete disarray. They haven't made the playoffs in 5 years since the boat incident. This is a franchise that has just been absolutely in a tailspin, but it's one of the model franchises in the NFL. Really, the Mara family is one of the revered ownership groups, and this Giants franchise has had some great runs, and I think they found in Brian Daboll the right guy to kind of get this. And I said it many times. I tweeted this out last night. Sirianni's done a great job, but I would have taken Brian Daboll as the Eagles' next head coach. Buffalo, I think Jason La Canfora, who was the CBS main newsbreaker at the time, had reported that Buffalo blocked Daboll from interviewing here, but some suggested he was not interested in the job here. But that was the guy that I wanted for Philadelphia. I thought he would have been a great fit, culture changer. And Nick has done a lot of that stuff, but I think the Giants found the right guy in this Giants team. They're moving in the right direction, and they're going to be good for a while, I think.
I think this is the start of something, probably a lot of playoff games between the Eagles and Giants because of what Nick Sirianni has done and what Brian Daboll has done. And one of the things I loved about Brian Daboll, as soon as he got hired, he goes outside the conventional way of thinking. He's not hiring his boys on his coaching staff. He goes out and says, you know what? I like this Mike Kafka guy. I know he's not familiar with me. I'm not familiar with him, but this guy's pretty smart. Oh, and by the way, Andy Reid has coached him. He's been an assistant under him. This is the guy I want to work with Daniel Jones and see if he's any good. Mike Kafka is the tremendous show. You go outside the box, you get Wink Martindale to be your defensive coordinator, say what you want about the guy. He is a pretty good coach. He sends a lot of pressure. Again, the Giants take a lot of risks, but it does work against teams like the Minnesota Vikings, Mike.
Well, I got to say, though, I think Wink Martindale yesterday, if you're watching that game, you're wondering if John Gannon was coaching that defense. They played a lot of soft zone in that game last night. They did not send nearly as much pressure because the last time they played the Vikings, Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson killed them. I mean, so they dialed the pressure back a lot in that game yesterday. Wink Martindale did because he knew it. And they brought it up during the broadcast yesterday. Who was that on Fox? Burkhardt and Olsen. And they said if the Vikings, the way this defense is right now, if the Vikings are going to win this game, they're going to have to do it underneath because the Giants just flat out are not letting you try to beat them over the top. And look, they took a page from the Eagles defense yesterday, the Giants did, and that's one of the reasons why they won that game.
They rush more than 4, only 24% of the time. They usually do that 42% of the time.
Right, way down. They're 20% less. They sent 4 essentially the whole game yesterday. They said, look, that's the formula in this league. Do not give up the big play. And they moved on.
How much coaching malpractice is it that Justin Jefferson doesn't get a single target in the fourth quarter?
I mean, the whole thing, him not getting targets, the last play call on fourth down that Cousins throws the ball 3 yards on an 8-yard fourth and 8. Look, the Giants' game plan was to take Jefferson away. That's why they didn't send pressure yesterday. Because if they send pressure in that game, you're not seeing Justin Jefferson. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think the Giants' game plan was to make sure that Jefferson wasn't going to be beating them and somebody else was. Now, the converse is what you're saying. How much malpractice that he didn't get the ball. Okay, he's not open right now. Now we have to do something different, and the Vikings didn't do it.
The Vikings just seem like that team, and I noticed it late in the season. If you shut down Justin Jefferson, you really do shut down that football team.
Yeah, well, Thielen has not been a factor. I mean, he is obviously not the same player that he was. He was an excellent player for them for a long time. He's not that secondary receiver. They just don't have that guy. They brought Hawkinson in, and he was a great find for them. But on the outside, and you can't win games nickel and dime. That's the whole formula in this league, and that's why the Eagles play the defense they do. It's hard to win games when you're nickel and diming your way up at the field. Like, it's just hard to constantly put together drives where a penalty doesn't come into play, an interception, a sack, something happens in 10-play drives that sets you back and causes field goals. So that's why these teams play that style of defense. And you saw the Giants. They weren't the leaders yesterday. They were the followers. They followed the John Gannon, Vic Fangio, if you will, defense. And if Jefferson's out of the game, now you have to try to nickel and dime your way up the field because you just don't have the other guys to kind of pick up the slack.
And this is where I think the Eagles have a huge advantage on Saturday because they have A.J. Brown. They have Devonta Smith. You can't shut down one of them. Oh, and by the way, Mike, I think Dallas Goedert is primed to have a big, big game against them on Saturday because they really struggled covering the tight end this week.
Yeah, Goddard should be a guy in this game where, the Giants, it'll be interesting to see if they employ the same style of defense. Are they going to sit in a soft zone and rush 4 against the Eagles? Do they feel like, all right, Jalen Hurts, one hit from knocking him out of this game because of him being already a little dinged up here? So it'll be interesting to see if Wink Martindale, what'd you say, 22% pressure? That's way off of his number, 22, 24. I forget what number you said, but that's I just went off of what I saw. They did not blitz nearly as much as normal, but you just gave the number. Are they going to go into that soft zone against the Eagles? Because if they do, you're right. The Eagles have more weapons than the Vikings do, complementary players. I mean, if you're going to say, all right, we're not going to let A.J. Brown beat us. All right, well, Devonta Smith does, and Dallas Goedert's there to move the sticks, and you got Devonta Smith on the outside. So, this will be an interesting chess match now that we've seen the Giants once. What do they follow it up with?
And here's very interesting. This is very interesting, too. As good as Jalen Hurts has been against man coverage this year, against zone coverage, and pretty much any situation you want to put Jalen Hurts in, he's been in the top 5, top 10, except for one. when Jalen Hurts faces the blitz, and this isn't counting his running stats, his passing numbers, he's 25th in the league in passer rating. So they might want to blitz him, although they did blitz him the first matchup, and Jalen pretty much had his way, and they could run the ball all day against them.
Yeah, I mean, the first time they played, it was the only time this year when I've watched a game with the Eagles and you said, man, the talent disparity is jumping off the television. I mean, the Eagles are just flat out more talented than the Giants. Now, what does that mean? Well, you still got to show up, you still have to execute, and you still have to make plays just because they're more talented. But it's obvious the first time they played 48-22 in New York. In fact, I went back last night and was, doing some research on that game. And some of the New York papers were writing about how Daboll didn't have the team prepared. They were a no-show. I mean, it was the one game this year where they really got criticized for just not showing up, not being prepared, being completely out-coached in that game. But since that point, it's not like the Giants had this like great record. That was like this leaping off point. Like they kind of limped into these playoffs here. So them getting that win yesterday, I'm not saying it was a surprise, but this is not the hot team. This isn't like Green Bay that had won 5-6 in a row to get themselves into the playoffs, and then nobody wanted to play them. No, the Giants limped into the playoffs, and people wanted to play this team. So let's not get crazy over the fact that they won a game against a team that I think we all understood was a 13-win team, but kind of a paper tiger.
It feels like in 2002 when Michael Vick led the Falcons to the first playoff win ever at Lambeau Field by a road team. And everybody was gushing and oozing over what's Michael Vick going to do to this Eagles defense. And Green Bay's defense wasn't good. It was like Minnesota. I'm like, all right, let's see what the Eagles do when they keep this guy in the pocket. And the Falcons only got 6 points, and everybody remembers, well, they should remember Brian Dawkins crushing Michael Vick at the goal line, but it kind of felt like that, right? Michael Vick had this big game on the road. He could throw, he could run, he was making plays with his legs, but he got a little nicked up that game, but then he faced an aggressive not saying the Eagles are an aggressive defense now, but he's facing a defense that had 70 sacks. That's what Daniel Jones is facing now. So I'm curious to see what happens on Saturday.
Daniel Jones had a historic performance yesterday. I mean, he absolutely – and look, that's – you can conversely say, well, the Vikings played soft zone too. The problem is they don't have the talent. I go back to Malcolm Jenkins' comment on my show, which was no coordinator worth his salt wants to blitz. You blitz because you're not talented enough. The problem with the Vikings is they need to blitz. They're not talented enough. They don't have the ability, and their secondary is not good enough. They have so many communication breakdowns in their secondary. They're not great athletes in their secondary. They're slow. So that's not a team personnel-wise that should be playing a soft zone with rushing forward. They just don't have that, top. And even if you have one good pass rusher, they don't have the depth. They don't have the ability to rotate their guys. So that pass rush gets diminished. They're slow in the secondary. They don't communicate well. That's not a good style of defense for them. So, Daniel Jones was finding the lanes. I mean, you're going to sit in soft zone. I don't have anybody open. Okay, I'm going to take off. We saw the Eagles, what they did to the Viking defense as well. Similar situation where Hurts just said, all right, you're in coverage. Good job. But I found some lanes, and I thought Daniel Jones picked perfect times to run last night.
Another reason I thought the Vikings struggled on, I shouldn't say, you know what? I'll switch this up to the Giants here. I thought the Giants giving Saquon Barkley off last week was probably the best thing they could have done because Saquon Barkley looked like week one Saquon Barkley. He was coming through with a freight train. He was averaging about, I think it was 6 or 7 yards per carry early on, had that big reception. And I said, why didn't Brandon Staley do this? Why couldn't Brandon Staley rest his guys in a meaningless game like the Giants? Because you saw the result early on. That's why the Giants were able to control most of this game. Well,
I mean, to be fair, the Chargers did control most of that game. I talk about this a lot. I mean, I'm not a Herbert hater by any stretch of the imagination. Heck, I think he's outstanding. But I don't put him on the same level as Mahomes and Burrow and Allen, that crew. The problem was Brandon Staley, well, he's not the offensive play caller, obviously, but they put too much faith in Herbert. People, I think you tweeted, why are they throwing the ball so much? Because they have so much faith in the quarterback. The problem was the quarterback didn't make a play. He just flat out didn't make a play. Can you say, why didn't they run the ball? Why didn't they just try to run clock? You have Austin Eckler. They have so much faith in Herbert that they, to a fault, call plays for Herbert, and he couldn't get it done. He did not make one play in that second half of that game, Justin Herbert. You're up 27, and they're still calling pass plays, and he could not get the chains moving. He could not keep drives together on that field, and that's what you need, man. When you have leads, we saw it all weekend long. You cannot take your foot off the pedal in this league, and that's one of the things this weekend. They talked about it during the Ravens game last night. Hey, the Ravens can't get down in this game because they don't have the ability to kind of get back in the game. Giant game, that's a team that does not have a lot of firepower on the outside. They just don't throw the ball down the field all that much, and yet they put up, a 30 spot plus yesterday. So we saw a lot of different things in these playoffs than we saw during the regular season. It's another example of what you see in all these weeks where we overreact and they look like this and they were terrible this week and they can't do that, they can't do this. Well, when the lights go on in the playoffs, everything you saw in the regular season many times gets thrown out the door.
Well, look at Ravens-Bengals, for example. I thought until Tyler Huntley fumbled that ball at the goal line, the Baltimore Ravens were going to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. That defense shut down Joe Burrow. And I know Joe Burrow's losing 3 of his 5 offensive linemen, but that seems to be the key to beating the Bengals. If their offensive line ain't clicking, forget it. They are not going to win the Super Bowl.
Well, you could say that, but last year he got sacked more than any quarterback in playoff history, and they made it to the Super Bowl. They ran out of gas once they got there. I don't want to say they ran out of gas. They just got beat by a better team. But look, they're going back. They showed the graphic last night how many times he got sacked last year, how many times he got sacked in the playoffs last year. 19 times he got sacked in the playoffs last year. The first half of the season this year, he had got sacked the most out of anybody in the league. And then when they went on this 8-game win streak, he only got sacked 8 times the rest of the way. But now, as you mentioned, Jeff, the fact that their offensive line is back to being a pretty much a mess, we'll see how that affects this Bengals team because I don't know. I mean, Buffalo obviously did not play a great game.
No.
But I'm not going to sit here and say that matters because what you do one week does not carry over to the next week. Buffalo got out. They won the game. Now it's time to move on and get ready for the Bengals. The Bengals didn't look great last night, but they got the win. They had a play. They took advantage of it. Now both those teams move on. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, I just thought those two teams didn't look that good yesterday, so now they've changed my opinion of them. No, the Cincinnati Bengals are the best team in the AFC for my money. Buffalo's number 2, and they're going to play this week.
It's funny, though, how I guess we could say with Buffalo, this was a game that I felt Buffalo should have won by at least 2 touchdowns. But Josh Allen and those turnovers, and again, we see the recurring theme here, and that's what I wrote about in our What We Learned column this week for CBS. Josh Allen's turnovers make these games tougher than what they are. And I don't think he can throw 2 picks, fumble, have it returned for a touchdown against the Bengals, then the Bills can walk away with a victory.
A lot of his turnovers, I think anyway, are a byproduct of them not being able to run the ball. I mean, they just cannot run the ball, and they don't even try to run it half the time. So he has to do so much, and then he ends up running the ball, and he's a little careless with the ball, and then he makes decisions. He'll try to throw. He's running around back there trying to make things happen. I think a lot of that could be avoided if they helped him out with a running game. They just don't have a running game, Buffalo, that's to me why I have Cincinnati as my best team in the AFC. They can run, they can throw, and they play the best defense. Buffalo cannot run the ball. They turn the ball over too much. Their defense is spotty. Kansas City does not run the ball a whole heck of a lot. Obviously, Mahomes is fantastic. Doesn't have great weapons. I'll take the Buffalo weapons over the Kansas City weapons as a unit. I like Kelsey the best of that unit. Well, Diggs is probably right there with them. And Kansas City's defense is spotty as well. Cincinnati's the most complete team. And as you said, Buffalo turns the ball over too much, and it's a byproduct of not being able to run the ball enough.
The Dolphins should not have been in that game yesterday. We're gonna be quite honest. Skylar Thompson didn't he played fine, but for a third-string quarterback. But again, he should not have been in that position where he had a chance to win that game late. And again, it's Buffalo. It's not like the Chargers charging it up. That's not the case. But Josh Allen leading the league in giveaways this year is a major concern to me, especially against an aggressive Bengals defense that, look, they won that game last night. Tyrod Taylor tried to reach over that plane, did not work, and Sam Hubbard's taking it 98 yards the other way. Cincinnati will make Buffalo pay. And again, this is where I get really curious because the Bengals looked really good early in that game against Buffalo before, obviously, everything happened with DeMar Hamlin. But I don't know, Mike. I feel like this is the matchup that we've been anticipating for at least the last 2 weeks now.
Right. It's the manifest destiny that these two teams ended up getting matched up with each other. Yeah, I mean, I've said for about the last 6-7 weeks, I like Cincinnati coming into the season. They obviously got off to a slow start. I didn't really back off of them. But to me, I've said for the last 6-7 weeks, they're my number one team in the league, not just the AFC. I think the Bengals are the best team in the league. Now, this offensive line problem changes things. You mess with somebody's offensive line, and you got a problem. And I think the Bengals now, that brings them maybe back to the pack. And I don't want to say they were so far ahead of the pack, but that offensive line situation, how does that affect them? I definitely think that's something that could be a problem here. You have to beat – look, another issue with Cincinnati for me, and we talked about this on my show, and I kind of talked myself almost out of Cincinnati. They won 3 road games last year to get to the Super Bowl. They're going to have to win 2 more road games. Which NFL team, I don't know of one, won 5 straight road games in the playoffs? That's what Cincinnati will have to do to get back to the playoffs. 3 last year, 2 more this year. That's a tall task, man, to ask to win 5 straight. In 2 years, I mean, it's not in one season, but 5 straight road games, that's a tall order, man.
Yeah, Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers, I think they won 3 straight. But, yeah, I'm with you.
The Giants won 3 straight with Eli. They were the 6th seed at 9-7, Pittsburgh as well. But over a 2-year span to win 5 straight road games, I don't know, you're the information guy over there.
I'm thinking this now that you mentioned Giants. I'm trying to remember their 17 run here. So they were I'm trying to remember their first playoff game. I think it was on the road. I think it was against Tampa Bay. So they won 3 straight. And then the next year they were at home when they lost to the Eagles. So, yeah, it might have been the Giants. That might have been the last team to do it.
3 straight. I'm talking about 5 straight.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I think the Giants were the last team to win 5 straight. Because if you remember in 11, they didn't win the division. They did win the division, but they won their first game. Then they had to play 2 road games. And they went to the Super Bowl. And when they lost in 08, they were home. So I think the Giants, that 7-11 Super Bowl team, I think that was the last team to win 5 straight road playoff games.
Okay, well, I'll take your word on that, but that's pretty daunting to say, hey, over a 2-year span, you're going to win 5 straight road playoff games. And against the teams, they'd have to do it. You're going to have to go to Buffalo and then Kansas City. Not 2 easy places to play. If they do that, that tells you all you need to know about how good Cincinnati is.
This is the benefit of having number 1 seed too, not just for the Eagles, but for the Chiefs as well. I think the Chiefs got the best possible matchup they could with Jacksonville. I think Andy Reid would have beaten the Chargers if he would have played them, but they smoked Jacksonville. And I know this is a different Jacksonville team, but they smoked Jacksonville earlier in the season. It wasn't a contest. Jacksonville.
Well, conversely, Jeff Kerr, Jacksonville went to L.A. this year and bombarded that Chargers team. They beat them 38-10. That was not a fair fight. They crushed that team, and they're down 27-0. So, again, what happens in the regular season, the aesthetics of that game, they're out the window. If you have a good coaching staff worth its salt, you're going to watch that game and say, all right, they did this. We're not going to let them do this time. I mean, that's what having good coaching does. And that's why, both teams, give LA some credit. They got crushed by the Jaguars in week 2, 2 or 3.
Week 3.
Because Jacksonville beat the Chargers 38-10 and then played Philadelphia the next week. And you're thinking, man, they just went out to LA and crushed the Chargers. There's a pretty good Jacksonville team coming into Philadelphia. Turns out they were a pretty good Jacksonville team. But that being said, they dominated the Chargers in that game. They didn't dominate them the other day. They needed to throw every punch they had to come back and win that game. So whatever happened in the regular season meeting, same with the Eagles, 48-22 was the most dominant game they probably played all season long. Do we feel like that's going to be the same script the third time? Maybe not.
And what's weird about the Eagles-Giants third time is the second time, as we pointed out earlier, the Eagles were just trying to, okay, let's just take care of business. They weren't really giving anything away. And the Giants, they just didn't play anybody. They didn't play Daniel Jones. They didn't play Saquon Barkley. I mean, Kenny Galladay, of all people, caught a touchdown catching that game. And
he had a nice block last night, Kenny Galladay.
Yeah, he did. Well, he did more than Jalen Reagor last night. Let's just say that.
Yeah. And somebody had suggested, I suggested this too, that the Eagles went very bland against the Giants with the possibility of seeing them again. So why show them 2 full games worth of our stuff? Let's just kind of get through our offense, get out of this game, and move on with the possibility of playing the Giants in 2 more weeks. And here the Giants are again. It's been a lot of rematch. I think every game in the first round was a rematch from the regular season.
Yeah, I think it's the first time in NFL history that's happened. And now in the divisional round, we're getting 2. Well, we're getting 3. We're definitely getting 3. It all depends who the 49ers play. Well, yeah, if the 49ers play the Bucs, we'll have 4 rematches.
Yeah, they beat the Bucs 38-7. That was probably – I talked about this on my show too. San Francisco, we're all talking about how great they are, and they're a very good team, very deep. Go look at their schedule. For all the people in the chat that always say, well, the Eagles didn't beat anybody. San Francisco's best win this season was against either Tampa Bay or Miami. One of those 2 teams was their best win of the year. San Francisco hasn't beaten anybody at all this season. So for the people who like to say you haven't beaten anybody, if you're good enough, it don't matter, because this league is filled with all teams that are about the same. Everybody you beat is a solid win. There are no there's no Houston Baptist teams lining up on a Sunday. These are all good teams that really the difference is, you might not have a better quarterback. I mean, you put a better quarterback on some of these teams and they're right around 500 or even the Houston Texans, who fought with everybody this year. They've had overtime game against Kansas City, Dallas game close, Philadelphia game close. Think about how many games the Houston Texans were in and just don't have the quarterback play. You give them a half decent quarterback, are they 9-8? Are they 8-9 instead of the dumpster fire that they ended up being? The quarterback play means so much in this league. So, that's where a lot of times we look at teams. Well, you haven't played anybody. Well, the whole league's the same. The whole league is the same, save for Cincinnati, because they have Joe Burrow. You take Joe Burrow off that team and, you give them Andy Dalton, they're probably a 10-7 type of team. But Joe Burrow makes them a special team. The same thing, Buffalo. If you beat Buffalo, people are impressed by that. You beat Kansas City. People are like, oh, well, you beat the Chiefs. There's not a lot of top end. There's not the 86 Bears or the Cowboy teams from the 90s or the Niner teams. No teams are like that in today's game.
I was kind of laughing at your point about the 49ers not playing, because I said that earlier, like, what world beaters have they beaten? And you're absolutely right, because there are only a couple really good teams. And I like to point out to everybody, I love DeMeco Ryans. I think DeMeco Ryans should get a head coaching job. But when on that broadcast Saturday, we were just reading about that defense, I'm like, hey, last time I've seen that defense play a really good quarterback, I'm not talking about Geno Smith, the Pro Bowler here. When they played a really good quarterback, Patrick Mahomes put up 40 off them. And this is where I kind of defend Jonathan Gannon. Well, I don't care how good of a defensive coordinator you are. It's an offensive league, especially with the quarterback. They're going to put up numbers off you. And the Chiefs were able to do that. And this is why I like the matchup for the Eagles, because Daniel Jones is, I hate to say, he's Geno Smith. They're in that same tier.
Yeah, well, listen, I'm not taking anything away from San Francisco. I think that team all year long, once they made the quarterback switch to Garoppolo, is when I said, all right, this team is now dangerous. I did not believe in Trey Lance one bit, and I thought that was going to hold them back, that they were going to have spotty quarterback play. when they got Garoppolo and got things rolling, and now Purdy, this isn't an indictment on. I'm saying for the people who say you don't beat anybody, my point is there's nobody to beat. I'm not judging the Niners based on what their best win is. I'm saying that comment is asinine to say that nobody beat. Minnesota has the best win of the year. They beat Buffalo on the road.
In Buffalo.
So I'm not sitting here saying I believe in Minnesota because they beat Buffalo, but there's many people who will say, well, they didn't beat anybody. I'm not that guy. The Niners don't need to have wins against, I mean, heck, their losses this year were Chicago, Atlanta, and Denver were three of their losses, and the other one they got blown out by Kansas City. To me, San Francisco doesn't need to beat Buffalo, Kansas City, and whoever else to prove to me they're a good team. That team's very, very good, and the Purdy kid has made he has stepped up to the line on every question asked of him so far. Now,
I still have some questions. I still have some questions.
Did not have a great completion percentage the other day, but man, when he needed to make some big throws, he made some big throws.
You know what? It's funny, Mike. Before I wrap things up with you here, I do have to say this about the 49ers. If they would happen to face the Eagles in the NFC Championship game and lose, and they're upset over that, I think if I was a 49ers fan, I would go, we couldn't beat the stinking Bears and the stinking Broncos, and that game would have been in a different location.
Well, think about this. In week 1, they played the Bears. It was a slop fest, and they lost that game. Trey Lance was their quarterback. If they would have made the right decision from training camp and not handed that kid that job, would Jimmy Garoppolo just found a way to win that game for them? And same thing, I think Lance got hurt in week 2, was it? And they played that game against Denver. They lost 11-10. And if they could have just figured out a way to win that game, how things could have been different. And that's everything. Look at Dallas. If Dallas finds a way to beat Jacksonville, if they find a way to beat Green Bay, two teams that were good, not great. I mean, Green Bay at the time was not a good football team. They were in their slide. Jacksonville turned out to be a solid team. But you look back at your schedule and say, man, there were 2 winnable games for Dallas. Maybe Dallas doesn't have to play tonight. Maybe they're waiting to see who they're getting ready to play. But that's why the regular season, there's where the regular season games matter, is that you have a chance to take care of your business. And when you don't, this is the consequence. And just like Cincinnati winning 5 straight road games to get back to the Super Bowl, there's possibly no shot that Dallas is winning 3 straight road games. They haven't won a road game in the playoffs since 1992. Good luck.
Mike Gill, always a pleasure having you on. I will join you tonight on the Sports Bash at 5:30. You have a good day, my friend.
Okay, man. See you.
And I'm running up against it here. Birds 365 coming up next with Joe McDonald, with John McMullen. McMullen's going to have all the information you need for Eagles-Giants, which will be Saturday at 8:15. It's going to be a fun week here on Good Morning NFC East. Once again, my name is Jeff Kerr. You guys have a good day.